Hiya! Welcome to another episode of Otaku Evolution. I'm Mike, Penguin Truth, and... it's time to review another 26-episode TV series. Look, some of my favorite anime are 26-plus episodes long, but as far as reviewing them for this show, it's a colossal pain in the ass. Rewatching all of the episodes, taking notes, making clips, it's something I do with everything, but for longer anime, it takes that much longer. It's why I don't do a lot of that anymore. On the other hand, because the show is 26 episodes, it means I don't have to cover every little plot detail and can give a more general overview without the summarize and snark rundowns that are only vaguely reviews to begin with. It does, however, mean that I have to do a bit of deeper thinking. Why can't I be less of a lazy bastard? Anyhoozle, it's about time we take a look at an anime based on a Yasuhiro Naito work. But obviously not the one you would expect me to cover first, which is Trigun. No, this is based on a video game he worked on, Gungrave. A video game nobody played or cared about. Seriously, how many people do you know that actually played either Gungrave game? That's what I thought. Despite that, Gungrave was not only turned into a full animated TV series by Madhouse, but was brought to North America by Genion and dubbed by Bang Zoom Entertainment. It even once aired on the now long-defunct Tech TV. I only checked out a few episodes back then, and I didn't think much of it, but a friend passed along some discs he burnt all the episodes onto, and I watched it in its entirety, and remember liking it just fine. And revisiting it for this review, I find myself with just about the same opinion. It's just fine. Yeah, it's an okay series. Parts of it are excellent, fragments of it are even brilliant, but mostly it's just fine. Which means that something along the way went a little screwy, and I think it owes that to the fact that it's based on the game. Gungrave follows Brandon Heat and Harry McDowell, two petty street toughs who grow up nobodies, but after a series of incidents that gets most of their friends killed, they're offered the opportunity to join the Millennion group. Millennion is a major mafia-like organization run by a guy known as Big Daddy, whose charge Maria Brandon has a thing for, though is too shy and withdrawn to pursue. Harry, meanwhile, aims to get his way to the top of the ladder, recruiting new people into the fold, starting a romance with an official's daughter, and using Brandon as his greatest and most loyal ace in the deck. However, after time it becomes clear that while the two old friends seem to share the same goal, there's a rift that ends in tragedy. Several years later, Brandon returns as the being called Beyond the Grave, and takes aim at Harry's Millennion for vengeance. Which he does by fighting a bunch of monstrous zombies and mutated living people. The series almost seems like two different shows back to back, with much of the first 16 episodes about how Brandon and Harry made their way up in the organization, and then a time skip to Beyond the Grave's battle with the Orgmen. Actually, the first episode takes place during this later time, then flashes back to that first story, so it's more accurate to say that the flashback takes up most of the show. And honestly, that backstory is a much better part of the whole. At least most of it is, because frankly, the parts about Millennion as a criminal enterprise before the zombies came into the picture are generally better than the parts afterwards. The sci-fi twist kind of taints a perfectly good crime drama with silliness. It kind of reminds me of...
I'm confused. You said he's dead.
How's he evening up with anybody? He's a ghost?
As I understood, a zombie of sorts.
Never thought I'd make a Sopranos reference in an anime review. Well, without Bonzo Truth being involved. I'm telling you, from episodes 2 until 16, the story of Brandon and Harry's rise in Millennium's ranks is damn compelling drama. They endure the loss of their close-knit group and become part of a bigger family, but a much more dangerous one that lives and dies by the code of iron that keeps honor among thieves and killers. We see Brandon go from a more quiet, gentle type to a consummate professional sweeper, tranquil in his dirty work, but ever the more distant. And meanwhile, Harry's appetites for power and control grow as his youthful exuberance and natural charisma earn him further acolytes. Brandon's relationship with the boss, Big Daddy, is an interesting dynamic. While he doesn't do business directly with him, he comes to visit Maria at Big Daddy's home, and they often spend time in tranquility, fishing. Big Daddy becomes the close father figure that the orphan Brandon never had, giving him confidence in who he is. Big Daddy, for his part, has genuine affection for Brandon, and wants the best for Maria, even though he begins to harbor feelings for his adopted daughter himself. Harry's relationship with Sherry, the daughter of Millennion underboss Bear Walken, is also worth noting. At first it appears like he's simply using her as an in to the inner circle, all the while getting dirt or throwing it on rivals in the syndicate with his connections. But it's debatable if Sherry is just a chess piece, a trophy, or an actual beloved romantic partner. Past the time skip, it seems like Harry is truly in love with her and cares for her safety, but while she's hardly ignorant of his work, he does keep much from her, perhaps for her own good. Harry recruits operatives Balabird Lee and Bob Poundmax to be his loyal henchmen. He even convinces a hitman Bungie to join their ranks, working with Brandon as a sweeper. Brandon is like an older brother and mentor to Bungie, but Bungie is more casually callous. With Millennion, loyalty is pretty much everything. Even a sniff of betrayal in the ranks is grounds for execution. We see the lamentable results in an episode where a made man helps his son leave town when he's incurred the wrath of Millennion allies. Bear can't bring himself to kill his old friend despite living for the Code of Iron. At some point, Harry stumbles onto a scheme by Lee's brother to bring back the dead to create loyal foot soldiers. The process, called necrolization, has been invented by Dr. Tokioka, and upon killing the gangsters using it, Harry and Lee plot with a mad scientist to use this process for their own undead soldiers. And boy, is Harry licking his chops to get this new toy and cement his takeover of Millennion. But Harry's increasing lust for power also leads him to shock that Brandon takes the Code of Iron more seriously than his friend's ambitions.
Very talented guys like Harry have natural gifts which allow them to succeed without much effort. They work as little as they can and look for shortcuts. Shortcuts worry me. Not that Harry isn't doing a fine job. The growth of the organization lately is due mainly to Harry. He's certainly qualified to be Millenion's next boss. Nor do I question his loyalty. But something in my gut tells me to beware of an unknown danger, a hidden threat. I promise you this. If Harry McDowell does any damage to this organization, he'll regret it.
Harry's not a traitor, and he never will be. You've got my word. However, each and every traitor who breaks the Code of Iron will receive the same punishment. No more, no less, regardless of rank or status. No matter who they are.
Harry does not take Brandon's perceived disloyalty well. In fact, he takes it quite badly. Homicidally bad. Family annihilatingly bad. He's prone to overreaction. They don't call him Bloody Harry because he pisses off the English.
Wake up! Wake up! Wake up! Wake up!
You're crying? Why? I thought you hated him.
Don't die! Please don't!
He was the one who betrayed me! How could he have chosen that feeble old fool over me? That son of a bitch betrayed me! How could I forgive him? There's no way I could forgive him! You see, I had to kill him myself. I was the one he betrayed. Brandon!
I don't want to give away everything, but Brandon is transformed into Beyond the Grave by Dr. Tokioka, who wants to make up for unleashing the monsters Harry uses upon the world. As Grave, Brandon's mission is twofold: taking down Harry and his inner circle, and protecting Mika Isagi, Maria's daughter, who has grown into a teen girl and baggage morality pet. Though, to be honest, 17 episodes into a 26-episode series seems a little late to be adding a main character we're supposed to care about. And so I've chosen mostly not to. Well, I'll care, but only as Mika is an extension of Maria. You know, an actual worthwhile character. And that brings us to the big action pieces of the show. Or really, boss fights. Because that is literally what they are, in every sense of the term. Boss fights. Grave starts his vengeance quest as soon as he's awoken, but we can't just have 19 episodes of him plowing through generic-looking monsters. That would be like watching somebody play the game. So he has to face his former allies in single combat matches, like the game. So yeah, they're just cramming all of that in the last third of the series. Grave fights some mooks, fights a boss. Broods and suffers, fights a boss. Contemplates the abomination he's become, fights a boss. Regrets having to slay people he respected, fights a boss. So yeah, basically it's just watching the video game. Well, he fights Bungie twice, because Bungie's so suicidally dumb, he tries fighting Grave before he can be genetically altered. I'd like to say they make the villain sympathetic, but really the only one I feel bad for is Bear Walken. He doesn't really have a choice. He knows Brandon Heat was an honorable man, but he works for Millennion. Harry McDowell's Millennion. The man who married his daughter and makes her happy. I guess I do feel a twinge of pity for Bungie too, since he thought of Brandon like a mentor. And they do this thing with a stray cat, but you know what? Fuck him. Fuck Tubby. Fuck Squinty. Fuck him. Bastards. Dr. Tokioka is certainly worth considering sympathy, though he would argue not to bother. He knows all along that his research is disgusting, but pushes further to perfect his technology until he finds an excuse to flee, and then relies on Grave to protect him. He supports Grave by fixing his wounds and keeping him armed, but he knows he's been living on borrowed time, and his wicked acts mean no amount of good he does can redeem him. All he's left with is regret in the end.
I once ignored the voices inside myself. I used to hold on to my life so tightly. I let people push me around because I was afraid to confront anyone. I gave in to evil temptations because my cowardice wouldn't let me stop. Now my memories, my regrets are blurred and indistinct. There's only one regret I can't let go of. I never got to make a difference.
I think that aside from Brandon and Maria, the character who suffers the most is Mika, to the point that her entire character is basically just loss. And it's easy to feel bad for her losses, at least in the abstract. The father she never knew was murdered when he tried confronting Harry about his betrayal. Her mother and surrogate father were hunted down and mercilessly eliminated so Harry wouldn't have to think of Brandon or Big Daddy anymore. Dr. T dies. Grave leaves her to go have one last showdown with Harry. Everyone she grows close to is ripped away from her cruelly. But honestly, I feel like besides a constant barrage of tragedy, there's just not a whole lot to her. She's simply an object of pity. On the other hand, while we're intended to revile Harry McDowell for taking everything away from Brandon, Maria, and Mika, it's difficult not to see how his perhaps once good intentions have twisted him, and after believing his best friend had sided against him, he becomes a cracked reflection. Eventually, Millennion, tiring of suffering setbacks from Beyond the Grave's vengeance on Harry, also turns against him, and everything he worked to gain is taken from him, until he has to run for his life from the group he built up for years. Eventually, all alone, he encounters Beyond the Grave, Brandon, where they started out, and they finally have it out, not in a duel, but in a piercing conversation, a heart-to-heart by two men who have lost everything they've ever had. I actually approve of this finale because Harry was never much of a combatant, and the show painstakingly built up the emotional baggage that simply fighting wouldn't have provided a catharsis for.
Big Daddy told me everything about you before he left us. And that was when I learned that you knew everything I'd done in order to climb the ladder to the top.
That's right! I did whatever had to be done. Got rid of anyone in my way to get another step up the ladder. Randy, and then Alzak, even Big Daddy. And then in secret I funded the research that led to necrolization. And you were watching every move I made and never told me!
You were the same way as a kid, you know. You haven't changed a bit. Always calm. Always ready to follow my lead. Always there if I needed you.
Did you think I was a fool for being so ambitious? That I was just like all the other cocky young punks, trying desperately to do the impossible?
At this point, Brandon and Harry are on their last legs and have little more life to exert. Brandon's vengeance has been largely satisfied, but he can't quite bring himself to think of his oldest friend as an enemy despite him being so. And Harry, for his part, still can't understand quite how he got where he is from where he'd been, or just refuses to admit his mistakes because of his unresolved hurt feelings. Basically, between the two of them, they've destroyed everyone in their lives in one way or another. In a different show, maybe I would have found this anticlimactic because of the building action, and expected Harry himself to become a necrolized mutant superior. I think I may have leaned slightly this way the first time I saw this, but if Gungrave is ever brilliant, it's actually in some of its surprisingly lower register scenes. For instance, in the linchpin episode of the show, episode 14, we see Big Daddy call all the bosses of Millennion together to announce his successor. We're led into a conversation between members of the organization speculating that it could be Harry's turn to run things. The audience has been let in on Harry's increasing influence, so we're expecting Harry to be chosen just as much as he and the others are. But when the moment actually comes, you can see Big Daddy's calculated move, his distaste for Harry's presumption. The scene is punctuated by Harry's measured reaction of applause, which masks his ill designs. That's an episode I could do a whole separate video for, and even considered. Maybe I'll do a list of favorite single or multi-part episode stories from anime someday and revisit it. There's certainly a lot to chew on in that episode alone, in a show that's not known for its subtlety. It's episodes like that that make me glad I've remained an anime fan for so long. But I think that, unfortunately, Gungrave falls short of greatness in the big picture because of its insistence on the boss fights that make it an on-the-rail game adaptation in the last third, when it had been so much more complex before the zombie fights took over. Its ultimate failing is its own origin as a video game. This is what keeps it from obtaining the greatness of a Cowboy Bebop, Michiko and Hatchin, or its predecessor Trigun, to an extent. But that being said, the zombie fights aren't the worst thing to happen to a show about mafia gangsters. I mean, it is kind of an interesting, if not necessary, twist in the story, and Beyond the Grave looks pretty boss tearing shit up with his guns while taking abuse. There's still plenty of emotional and thematic complexities after the time skip, and the show has a fitting finale that may leave you a little teary, so it's not just turning its wheels in desperation. It's important to weigh the merits with the mistakes. I try to find whatever good I can in the titles I cover, whenever there's enough to be found. Will you love Gungrave? Well, I don't. But I like it, and that's still more than I can say for a lot of its peers. Will I get to Trigun at some point? Well, I wouldn't count on it soon. Unless you contribute to my Patreon. Next time on Otaku Evolution, let's see. Something short I think will be manageable. Until then, see ya!
Welcome home.